Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the most unique, entertaining, and compelling sports talk podcast you'll ever listen to.
Let's be great. Let's be great.
Wendell's World in Sports with the one and only Wendell Wallace.
Giannis charging down the lane to the rim, double clutch, no good, tipped in. Giannis tipped it home.
Subscribe, rate, and review anywhere and everywhere you listen to this and all your favorite podcasts. And now, from Washington, D.C. metropolitan area, Rip, Roaring, and ready to rumble, Wendell Wallace.
And welcome to Wendell's World of Sports. I'm your host, Wendell Wallace. So glad that you could be with us. A lot of things to get down on and discuss today in the world of sports. Bonjour, bonsoir, good morning, good abend, que pasa, mi amigos, shalom, wassalamu alaikum, konnichiwa, namaste, Wendell's World in Sports. I'm your host, Wendell Wallace. So glad that you could be with us. The YouTube episode of what I put down on a normal basis on my audio podcast, Wendell's World in Sports. Here's what I need for you to do. If you would, please, if you could just go ahead, subscribe to my YouTube channel. You could go ahead and like this video. If you could go ahead and leave a comment, whatever I'm speaking about in terms of what your thoughts and opinions are about the NFC and AFC championships, I would appreciate it so doggone much. And then also every Tuesday night, every Wednesday morning, wherever you're listening to this podcast, I put out my audio version of Wendell's World of Sports. So I need for you to go to where you listen to your favorite podcast. Then I need for you to type in WENDELL'S, Wendell's World in Sports. Then I need for you to subscribe, download, rate, review, follow, and most importantly, enjoy the most entertaining, unique, thought-provoking sports talk podcast that you can listen to, Wendell's World in Sports with yours truly, Wendell Wallace. If you could do that, I really would appreciate it. And also, if you could go ahead, just on a personal level, take the time to make sure that you're moving this society in a place of love, peace, unity, understanding, and respect for everybody who deserves it, judging people on who they are as human beings in terms of their moral fiber, in terms of what's in their heart, in terms of goodness, loving each other, harmonious, respect. Can we please do that and not be judging people on the color of their skin, their gender, who they love, what God they worship, if they worship a God at all, how much money they have, how much privilege they have? Can we please try to learn from folks so we can pass along the lessons of other folks who might not look like us, who might not act like us, who might not be from the same part of the street that we're on? Can we please learn the lessons of those people with love, unity, respect, and then pass it on to our children and then their children so they can live in a utopian society which we're not living in for my generation, your generation, way too selfish, way too ignorant, way too stupid, and way too racist to live in a society that I want to live in. I'm faulting that myself with me. So what we need to do to make sure that we're long gone from this world that we live in, that we have it set up to where our children and their children and their children can truly live in a world where you are based on who you are as a human being, not based on your race or your gender or the stereotypes or the ignorance that come with who you love and your political affiliation and what part of the world are you from and how much money do you have and what side of the tracks you live on. We can judge people based squarely solely on who they are as human beings. So if we could take the time to start that movement, I think that we would be moving this world in the right direction. And when our time comes to go to the pearly gates, maybe our resume will be strong enough for us to say, come on in. Glad to have you. Wendell's World in Sports. I'm your host, Wendell Wallace. So glad that you could be with us. So let's go ahead, start talking about the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl is set now. I'm not going to be speaking about who's going to be winning, and I'm not going to be speaking about the storylines of Cincinnati versus the Los Angeles Rams. Plenty of time for that, man. We've got a couple of weeks to dissect and discuss all those things. So I just want to go in review and speak about the AFC and the NFC championship games. First, starting off with the Cincinnati Bengals. Wow. The Cincinnati flipping Bengals. Remember when I always speak about, man, which team, we always have a team that's going to be coming into the season in the NFL. Always. Where you take a look at them and you say there's no way that team is going to be successful. There's no way that team is going to have any success whatsoever based on their personnel, based on their history, based on their owner, based on the history of the franchise in terms of dysfunction or ineptitude or incompetence, whatever you want to put it. We always go into a season where there's going to be at least one team that's going to shock the world, both in a way where we never thought that they would be this good, and another way on the opposite end of the spectrum where we never thought that a team that we thought had Super Bowl aspirations, were good enough to win the Super Bowl, were good enough to win the conference, were good enough to win the division. All of a sudden now they are disappointing. All of a sudden now their record is below 500. All of a sudden now major changes need to be happening in that organization. All of those things happening. The Cincinnati Bengals. There is no way. I don't care what you thought about Joe Burrow. I don't care what you thought about the first-round draft choice of Jamar Chase. I don't care what you thought about T. Higgins. I don't care about any of that stuff. I don't care what you thought about the defense. Unless you are the most loyal and die-hearted and rose-colored glasses fan of the Cincinnati Bengals, there is no way going into this season where you said, yeah, when I'm thinking about playoff teams, and when I'm thinking about Super Bowl teams in the AFC, I'm thinking about the Buffalo Bills. I'm thinking about the Kansas City used to be Champions. I'm thinking about the Cleveland Browns. I'm thinking about all of these teams. I'm thinking about the Baltimore Ravens. I'm thinking about possibly maybe the Miami Dolphins. I'm thinking about all these teams. And, oh yes, of course, I'm thinking about the Cincinnati Bengals who last year won, 2 or 3 or 4 games? Oh, yeah, that's the team I'm going to be looking for in terms of them having a real chance to win the Super Bowl. No. You did not think that. You cannot convince me that you thought that. No, in no way, shape, or form did you think that. But here they are, and it happens every single year. I'm not talking about a team that's making a drastic change in terms of being one of the worst teams record-wise in the NFL 1 year ago to going to the Super Bowl with a strong possibility of winning it like the Cincinnati Bengals are this season. But there's always a team that greatly overachieves. And this season it was the Cincinnati Bengals, man, pulling off another upset on the road to make it to the Super Bowl for the first time since 1989, coming back from 18 points down in the second quarter to beat the Kansas City football team in overtime. 27-24, Joe Burrow, 27 of 38 for 250 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. T. Higgins, 6 passes on 7 or 8 targets, 103 yards. Jamar Chase, he didn't go off for 250 or 300 or 500 yards on 15 or 20 catches, which I'm quite sure many people thought that the Cincinnati Bengals were going to win this football game. That's exactly what he had to do against Kansas City. No, he only caught 6 passes for 54 yards, had a touchdown. And when he caught that touchdown, the score 21-13 in favor of Kansas City, and Kansas City momentum was going down the Bemis, and Joe Burrow and that defense was pulling the handle to make sure that it flushed. And when Cincinnati had that touchdown, with Joe Burrow threw that pass to Jamar Chase, and he caught that touchdown, and then the 2-point conversion made it 21-all. You were thinking to yourself, if you're a Kansas City football fan, you're thinking, if you had Kansas City on the money line, you were thinking, they have finally got in tune with Jamar Chase. This last quarter, man, this could be the situation where Jamar Chase might go off. But for the most part, Kansas City, that defense, they kept Jamar Chase in check. But he made the touchdown to bring them back into the game and made it a game at that moment in time. But if we're speaking about the game balls, if we're speaking about MVPs, if we're speaking about the leading actor in the great movie called Cincinnati is Going to the Super Bowl, holy Mike Brown, what's going on here? The star of that movie, the star of that film, the Denzel Washington, the Tom Hanks, the Sidney Poitier, the Spencer Tracy, the Michael Douglas of that flick has to be the defense for Cincinnati, the MVPs of the game, shutting down Kansas City's offense in the second half, and Patrick Mahomes. I mean, we could go back. There was a lot of games. There was a couple of games this season in a regular season where you took a look at the way he played and you said, yeah, that was, if that's not the worst performance of his career as the starting quarterback for Kansas City, it's pretty close. But if you think about the magnitude of the game, if you think about where Kansas City was at one point during this game, and you're speaking about Kansas City trying to get back and repeat for the 4th time as AFC champions, conference champions, and then trying to go to Los Angeles and take revenge on losing in the Super Bowl from last year. And again, starting that narrative in terms of Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid. There's, historical narrative that need to be written still. And the book is just beginning. We're still in the early stages of the Hall of Fame book, the resume, whatever, of Patrick Mahomes. But man, you were starting to think about, if we're going to be sitting here speaking about Patrick Mahomes, Tom Brady, this, that, and the other, man. Tom Brady, who, is he retired, by the way? He said he retired, then he came back and said, no, I'm not retired. I haven't made up my mind yet. Then he came back and said, I am retired, until I see Tom Brady get in front of a camera and say, I am retired. Then I'm just going to hold off that speculation until it happens. But when we're speaking about Patrick Mahomes and, him writing a resume, is he going to be the greatest quarterback of all time and all these type of things, man, when you're Patrick Mahomes, and you're trying to go after someone like Tom Brady, the GOAT, and you're speaking about opportunities, there is one of the things that I think many people aren't really thinking about, where we say Tom Brady played really good football for the most part, for over 2 decades. So if we're speaking about that's one thing where, when we speak about Tom Brady's greatness, and we speak about other players living up to that greatness and other quarterbacks, regardless of what they do, when they're going to be compared to Tom Brady, one of the things is the fact that when Tom Brady was 43 years old, he won his 7th Super Bowl championship, and at the age of 44 was still slinging the ball around and was still considered a top 4 or 5 quarterback, even though Tampa Bay lost in their divisional game against the almost could be Super Bowl champions Los Angeles Rams in TB12's last game. So when we're speaking about putting up a resume for anybody to be compared as the greatest quarterback or the greatest football player, or this generation's great versus Tom Brady's generation's great, in which Tom Brady is the greatest of his generation, hey man, this was a missed opportunity for Patrick Mahomes. Now, I understand that Patrick Mahomes is not sitting there right now in Kansas City or wherever he's chilling right now, kind of thinking, man, I just lost an opportunity to be getting closer, to inch closer to the greatness of Tom Brady. He's thinking more about, damn, I missed an opportunity to win my 2nd Super Bowl. So I understand all that, but man, this was a big, big, big missed opportunity for Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City football team, and for Andy Reid and Eric Bieniemy to win themselves their 2nd Super Bowl championship. And for Patrick Mahomes, as I mentioned before, this had to be probably his 2nd or maybe his worst played halves in his football career, in his NFL career. This was a situation where we can make that argument, man. It was in the situation where Cincinnati was making a great comeback and we should all be bowing down and applauding Cincinnati for what they did, or should we be ridiculing Kansas City and talking about if they would have done this and if they would have done that, and they messed up here and Andy Reid messed up there, and the first half opportunity near the end, missing a score or a touchdown, killed them. And this was more of a situation where Kansas City snatched defeat from the jaws of victory, rather than Cincinnati pulling an unbelievable comeback, showing their mettle this season as one of the elite teams in the NFL. So which way are we going to go with this? Which is the narrative? What is your opinion on this? Because one of the reasons why that's even a discussion, if it is going to be a discussion, and I know it's going to be a discussion, whether this was a game that Kansas City gave away or was it a situation where Cincinnati took it from them. I think because of who Kansas City is, being the best team in the AFC for the last 4 years, finishing this season with a 12-5 record, and everybody going on the assumption that, hey, the Kansas City football team finally has found the answers to the test, and now Patrick Mahomes has finally found how to work that offense in terms of it's okay to score runs through singles and doubles. You don't have to hit 4-run home runs all the time. Striking out is not a good thing, that you can go ahead and hit singles and doubles, and that'll set up the home run shot. So they finally have that working. The emotion coming off the game, that epic game, that all-time instant classic game, we'll get to that a little bit later on. But that all-time classic game against the Buffalo Bills, unbelievable, the greatest game that I've ever seen and all that stuff. So when you're speaking about the narrative of Kansas City for the 2021 season and winning the Super Bowl this season, they can go back and point to that and say, unbelievable, greatest game we've ever seen, instant classic, all those things against the Buffalo Bills. All of that was baked into the cake. They were playing the championship game at home. All of this stuff was baked into the cake to say, man, this wasn't no situation where the Cincinnati Bengals won that bad boy. It was a situation where the Kansas City football team, led by the greatest quarterback of his generation, or in the lead so far as being the greatest quarterback of his generation and moving towards being one of the all-time greats, and Patrick Mahomes, a Hall of Fame coach, an underrated coach, soon to be Hall of Famer as soon as he retires, and Andy Reid. This was a situation of those guys choking. This wasn't a situation of Cincinnati taking the victory. It was a situation of Kansas City coughing up and choking the victory and handing it over to the Cincinnati Bengals because of all those things I just mentioned, because of who Kansas City has been, because who Patrick Mahomes has been, because we're still basking in the glow of what that game was last week between Buffalo and Kansas City. All of those things are playing into the role, playing at home in Kansas City. All of these things are going into the narrative that, man, Kansas City gave that game away. Cincinnati also. This wasn't a situation where this was Buffalo. This wasn't a situation where it was New England. This wasn't a situation where it wasn't the quote-unquote glamour team from the AFC, one of the teams that coming into the season you thought were going to be real favorites to win a championship. This wasn't the Cleveland Browns. If the Cleveland Browns would have done this to the Kansas City Chiefs because of the narrative, because of who Cleveland is, because of their futility mixed into the bag of their tremendous and strong support that they have as a fan base, not just in Cleveland, Ohio, but all over the country, the entire narrative in terms of was this a situation of Kansas City giving the game away or Cleveland coming back to take the victory, showing mettle, showing heart, showing toughness, all of that stuff would have pointed more toward Cleveland doing that because of the history and because of the sexier storyline and that type of thing. Cincinnati, no one was speaking about Cincinnati doing anything this year. Yeah, Joe Burrow is cool, Joe Cool is nice and everything on ice, but no one was speaking about Cincinnati doing those type of things. And when you take a look at the history over this past decade concerning the Cincinnati Bengals, and you're speaking about an unproven starter coming off of a devastating injury in his second year, no one was thinking about Cincinnati doing these things. So because of that, it makes it easier to say that this was a game that was given to the Cincinnati Bengals by the Kansas City Chiefs. Don't let that fool you. Did Kansas City do things to give Cincinnati an opportunity to win the game? Yes. But you know what? In most parts, when you're speaking about games like this, you can go back and you can take a look at any play, whether it's a fumble, whether it's an interception, whether it's a missed third down opportunity, whether it's a missed fourth down opportunity, whether it's a made fourth down opportunity, whether it's a bad punt, whether it's a missed tackle, whether it's a missed field goal. There are so many plays that goes into a game of whether a team wins or loses. You just can't think of the macro in terms of, Patrick Mahomes threw an interception. Patrick Mahomes did this. Andy Reid didn't make this call. Kansas City didn't score on this drive. So because of that, it was a game where Kansas City gave it to Cincinnati. They were up 21-3. Because of that, 18 points playing at home for the AFC Championship and you're Patrick Mahomes, well then, of course, anything less than a victory would have been considered a choke. Not giving credit to Cincinnati. And maybe over time, when Kansas City's and Patrick Mahomes, when this run with them, whether it's a dynasty or whether it's a bust, maybe, again, we'll have to revisit this game and kind of take a look and say, was it the situation where Kansas City gave it to them or Cincinnati won this game because of grit and toughness and never give up attitude? If Joe Burrow maximizes his potential and he leads Cincinnati to 2 or 3 or 4 Super Bowl victories, I'm not saying that he is, but if Joe Burrow to Jamar Chase becomes this generation's Joe Montana to Jerry Rice in terms of its effectiveness. I'm not saying that Joe Burrow is going to be Joe Montana, and I'm not saying that Jamar Chase is going to be Jerry Rice, but in terms of speaking about wide receiver, quarterback, wide receiver, chemistry, combination, relationship, and effectiveness and winning championships and such, if that becomes one of the foundations Burrow to Chase for Cincinnati to be winning championships, then maybe we can look back in 6 and 7 years and say, well, you know what? This wasn't a situation of Cincinnati being given this game. Now that we know what Cincinnati is all about 4, 5, 6, 8 years into this run of Joe Burrow, Zach Taylor, this version of the Cincinnati Bengals, now we know more than ever, but that game Cincinnati took and Kansas City didn't give it away, regardless of what happens with the Kansas City football team moving forward. So, Wendell's World of Sports, the podcast, YouTube episode podcast right here. Give me a like, give me a subscription, then go where you listen to your favorite podcast, like, subscribe, download, and do all those things. Rate, review, all the good stuff on Apple, iTunes, anywhere where you listen to your favorite podcast. So, Kansas City, complete control in the first half. After the Bengals punted on their first drive of the game, KC went on an easy 11-play, 84-yard drive that was capped off by Mahomes on a TD pass to Tyreek Hill for a touchdown. And you said, man, the momentum from that Buffalo game just, once again, just transferred over to the next game. After the Bengals got a field goal to make it 7-3 on third down, Mahomes escaped the rush not once but twice, doing a little whirling dervish back at the line of scrimmage and below that, moving to his right, looking downfield, hit Travis Kelce, nice little push pass in the end zone right side for a 14-3 lead. Then on the next possession with 5:04 left to go with the first half, Mahomes threw another touchdown. This one to Hardeman to make it 21-3. McCole Hardeman to make it 21-3. And you thought to yourself, game over, ball game, because at that point, Mahomes was slicing and dicing and tearing them up. At that point, at the time where he threw his third touchdown pass, fourth straight championship game, by the way, in which Mahomes had thrown 3 touchdown passes. At that point, he was 18 of 21, 220 yards, 3 touchdowns, all in the first half, and you said ball game. This was a nice little run by the Cincinnati Bengals. They got lucky in terms of Lamar Jackson in the later part of the season had an ankle injury, and Baltimore kind of faded out. They got lucky because the Pittsburgh Steelers kind of teetered out because they didn't have a quarterback, only in Hall of Fame name only. This was a situation where, a lot of things fell their way. In the playoffs, they had the opportunity to beat the Tennessee Titans with Derrick Henry not close to being 100% and relying on Ryan Tannehill, so they kind of got lucky with that one. So now Cinderella turns into a pumpkin. It officially happened at 5:04 in the first half, because now you ain't playing the Las Vegas Raiders. Now you ain't playing the Tennessee Titans. Now you ain't playing any of those teams. You're playing these champions, man. You are playing the best. You are playing Patrick Mahomes, 21-3. Patrick Mahomes doesn't give up 21-3 leads in the AFC Championship game, whether it's at home, whether it's at road, whether it's in another country, whether it's on another planet. He doesn't give up those leads, baby. So you can say bye-bye to anything in terms of those guys. Speaking of Cincinnati coming back and getting back into this game until Sajay P. Ryan scored on a 41-yard screen pass with a minute 5 left to go in the first half to make it 21-10. Okay. All right, we still got the entire second half, blah, 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 21-10. Okay, it's not going to be a complete blowout. By the way, Kansas City got the ball, drove 66 yards. Okay, in 5 plays, making it look easy. Okay, no problem. 13 seconds left. They used their final timeout. No problem. We're going to put this in the end zone. At the very worst, we're going to get a field goal to make it a strong 2-possession game, making it 24-10 at the very least. Going into the halftime, everything's going to be cool. All we need to do is just get that ball in the end zone. Wait a minute. Patrick Mahomes threw an out pass left side to Tyreek Hill, and he was caught behind the line of scrimmage. He was caught not getting into the end zone with only 9 seconds to go. And Kansas City didn't have any other timeouts. 3, 2, 1, end of the half. Despite not having timeouts, you saw Patrick Mahomes. I don't know if it was out of frustration. I don't know what it was out of, but it was a missed opportunity. So instead of being up at the very least 24-10, the Bengals go in with the momentum. They go in with some belief. And it's like 21-10. Y'all, we're still in this game. We are still in this game, and I think at that moment, I don't know whether, we're speaking about, I wasn't in the locker room. I hadn't had a chance to speak to any of the guys or anything like that, but from the outside here in Las Vegas, looking at the television screen and watching this game from my townhome in Las Vegas, Nevada, and taking a look at what was happening on the field at Arrowhead Stadium in Kansas City, Missouri, it seemed like in the second half, the offense for KC brought that missed opportunity on the field with them. And it was not good. In the first half, you took a look at Mahomes, as I mentioned before, 18 of 21, 220 yards, 3 touchdowns. The third quarter, the best quarterback in the game was 3 of 9, 17 yards, and an interception. Now, we finished the game 26 of 39 for 275 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. But I'm telling you, man, that failure to score at the end of the first half, I think after that, mentally, Kansas City collapsed. And then it allowed Cincinnati and that defense to start getting in their head. Because in the second half, the Bengals dominated. Dominated the second half, dominated the fourth quarter, dominated overtime, dominated Holmes. Outscored them 24-3 after being down 21-3 in the third quarter. And the second quarter. It was something else, man. It got completely into their heads. Speaking of the defense from Cincinnati with Kansas City, if you take a look at the second half possessions or the third quarter possessions or the third and fourth quarter possessions for Kansas City, coming out in the second half, 5 plays, 16 yards, had to punt the ball. Next possession, 5 plays, 17 yards, had to punt the football. Third possession, 2 plays, 7 yards. Then Mahomes threw that interception to put Cincinnati in an advantageous position to score. Fourth possession, 3 plays, minus 2 yards, and another punt for Kansas City. Fifth possession of the second half, 3 plays, minus 4 yards, and a punt. So we're speaking about before they drove down for the game-tying field goal, and even that near the end when they were in the red zone, the last couple of plays were a little bit, shall we say, clunky and flunky. Second half, if you take away the last drive of the game in regulation for Kansas City, they ran 18 plays, 34 yards. Kansas City, night and day from what they were doing in the first half of the game to now the second half. I don't think they ever got over that missed opportunity to score. I'm telling you, I don't know. I haven't spoken to anybody, but that's my thoughts and feelings right there. Cincinnati on defense got into their heads. You saw Tyreek Hill and another one of the receivers yelling and screaming at each other on the sidelines. I just thought that this was a situation where, man, you know what? We're slowly starting to see the things being slipped away. We're not scoring with the same ease. We're not moving with the ball with the same ease. And I thought there was some frustration involved. And I thought that it played to the Kansas City football team at the beginning of the season and when they were scruffling and struggling a bit to get back to where they were in terms of expectations were concerned. There was all of a sudden now the abandonment of the running game in the second half of Kansas City, and it was just a matter of they were going to seize the momentum back. They were going to get their offensive mojo back, and they wanted to do it, and they wanted to get it back quickly. We were now the impatience that Kansas City exhibited early on in the season all of a sudden reared its ugly head in the second half of this game against Cincinnati, and it cost them. You saw it in their body language. You just saw it on that football field. You saw it in their action, and because of that, it cost them the game. It allowed Cincinnati. It wasn't a situation where Kansas City gave them the football game, but it allowed Cincinnati to take advantage of any miscues, of any type of negativity, any type of falsehood in terms of are we going to be able to win this football game. That's not called giving a football game away for Kansas City. That was called Cincinnati taking their heart, taking their soul, taking their confidence, and taking their opportunity to go back to the Super Bowl for the 4th time. Wendell's World in Sports. I'm your on the podcast. I'm your host, Wendell Wallace. So glad that you could be with us. So Joe Burrow, spoke about him enough in terms of 3-4 years down the line, who's going to be that guy? Who's going to be the new Peyton Manning? Who's going to be the new Ben Roethlisberger? Who's going to be the new next Drew Brees? Who's going to be that Tom Brady? And we listed Justin Herbert, and we listed Josh Allen, and of course we have Patrick Mahomes and possibly Lamar Jackson. Man, Joe Burrow leading the Cincinnati Bengals to the Super Bowl with an offensive line that is putrid in terms of the passing game is concerned. The same Joe Burrow who was sacked and beat up by the Tennessee Titans, sacked 9 times, still found a way to make plays and get the job done. And against Kansas City, multitude of times in this game where he was ready to get sacked, where he was ready to go down, but he made a big play. I remember one of the biggest plays in the game, 3rd and 7. Looked like Joe Burrow was sacked. Looked like Joe Burrow was going down. Kansas City lineman had an opportunity to sack him, to get him not once but twice, to get Cincinnati off the field and maybe have the opportunity for Kansas City to get back that momentum that they lost at the end of the first half. But Burrow didn't let that happen. So it was an awesome game, and I'm telling you, what this game does for the history of the league. Remember last week we were talking about the game between Kansas City and Buffalo, the greatest football game that's ever been seen. Man, this might have been the greatest game of any sport that I've ever seen, right? What does that narrative mean now? What does that game mean now? Now that Cincinnati is the one that's going to the Super Bowl and not Kansas City. What does that game between Buffalo and Kansas City mean as far as historical preference, as far as historical impact is concerned on the NFL? All of a sudden now, the greatest game of all time that we were speaking about a little while ago doesn't compare with the Immaculate Reception, the divisional playoff game between the Oakland Raiders and the Pittsburgh Steelers back in 1972. Despite losing to Miami in the championship game the next week, that play by Pittsburgh, Franco Harris coming out of the whoever's to pick up that pass on 4th down from Terry Bradshaw off the rebound to score that touchdown, that basically started the embers that became a burning fire, to which is the dynasty of the 1970s, 4 Super Bowl championships for the Pittsburgh Steelers. The play was also selected, when you're speaking about the Immaculate Reception, as the greatest play of all time. One of the greatest, if not the greatest play of all time. Sorry, that doesn't match up in terms of the game last week. Last week's game now doesn't match up to what the Immaculate Reception was all about. The Sea of Hands game, the 1974 AFC Divisional Championship, or a playoff game between Miami and Oakland, where Miami defeat of when they lost to Oakland 28-26, ended their historic run of going to the Super Bowl 3 times. They went and lost to the Dallas Cowboys, then they went undefeated and beat the Washington football team, and then they repeated by beating up on the Minnesota Vikings. The loss to the Oakland Raiders in that divisional championship game, where both teams came in as heavy favorites to win the championship, even though Pittsburgh was the one that finally did win, that was the game where it denied denied Miami the historical run of making it to 4 straight Super Bowls. In fact, the last team that had gone to the Super Bowl 4 straight times was the Buffalo Bills. And that really, when you're speaking about that game, the Sea of Hands game between Oakland and Miami back in 1974, it really meant the end of an era of Bob Greasy and Jim Kick and Mercury Morris and Larry Zonka and those guys, and the no-name defense and such. So that was the end of an era. So because of that game, I think, holds more prominence and more importance in the annals of NFL history's greatest games, more than what we saw last week, because of what happened this week. Last week's game between Buffalo and Kansas City, that game in terms of historical importance and remembrance takes a hit because of what happened with this game between Kansas City and Cincinnati. I would put, I guess you could probably say I would put the game last week on the same level as the 81-82 AFC divisional game between the San Diego Chargers and the Miami Dolphins. I would put it somewhere, maybe, I don't know. Maybe I'm not going to, you know what? Another game that gets overlooked is the launch of the Joe Montana, Bill Walsh, San Francisco dynasty, the 1981 NFC title game between the San Francisco 49ers and the Dallas Cowboys. Down 27-21, Joe Montana hit Dwight Clark in the back of the end zone, organized an 89-yard drive, which, as I mentioned before, Dwight Clark catching the ball over Everson Walls to start that dynasty, to start the launch of until Tom Brady came around, the greatest quarterback who's ever played, Joe Montana. That narrative started. So, look, man, when you're speaking about what happened this week as far as Cincinnati beating Kansas City, the hit that it received in terms of Kansas City-Buffalo's game puts it on the same level, 1981 San Diego and Miami, the 1971 AFC divisional championship or a divisional round between the Kansas City football team and the Miami Dolphins, maybe the 1977 AFC game between the Oakland Raiders and Baltimore Colts, somewhere around there. But that's in the past, but now in the future, Joe Cool, Joe Burrow, my man, is going to the Super Bowl. The Cincinnati Bengals, giving life, giving hope to fans of my Washington Snyderskins, the New York Jets, the Detroit Lions, the Cleveland Browns, that yes, even with an owner like Mike Brown, yes, even with years and years of ineptitude and dysfunction and being thrifty and being frugal and not running the organization the way a quote-unquote annual Super Bowl contending team would run their organization, Mike Brown, who was so skinflint for years, didn't even want to spend the money on an appropriate scouting staff so they could go out and get something. Marvin Lewis was the guy that had to go out and play everything. He was the guy that had to go out and play scout and had to play general manager and had to play drafting guru and all those type of things because Mike Brown was too cheap, was too skinflint to go ahead and spend the money on a scouting a scouting department that's needed to win championships and compete for championships. If the Achilles Smith Cincinnati Bengals, if the Dan Wilkinson Cincinnati Bengals, if the Kajana Carter Cincinnati Bengals, if the Achilles Smith Cincinnati Bengals, if the David Klingler Cincinnati Bengals can go ahead after years in ineptitude finally get to the Super Bowl, becoming the Phoenix Suns of the NFL this season in terms of a team that's run by a bad owner, but still the pieces are in place for them to win a championship, just like Phoenix put themselves in the championship position last season after acquiring Chris Paul and drafting Devin Booker. Man, if the Cincinnati Bengals can do this, I'm hoping, I'm praying, I'm wishing upon the star, man, that this will influence other teams who we think that they have no chance of doing anything to say, if the Cincinnati Bengals can do it, so can we. In fact, as Joe Burrow can say, as Joe Burrow said many times, why not us? So thank you very much for Cincinnati moving on to the Super Bowl. If anybody can do it, the Cincinnati Bengals over the Kansas City Chiefs, give those teams of downtrodden ineptitude hope. We can hope. Me being a Washington football fan, we can hope and we can pray. But congratulations to the AFC champion, Cincinnati Bengals. Good morning, good afternoon, que pasa, mi amigos, mi llamo Wendell Wallace, standing amongst the tallest, here to talk about a podcast named Wendell's World in Sports, a show talking about what is happening on the basketball of courts, the football of fields, to reveal my thoughts and opinions and otherworldly dimensions about what is happening in the everyday of college basketball, my Georgetown Hoyas, and the NBA, to talk about who's doing poorly, who's doing well in college football and the NFL for messieurs and my mademoiselles. Born and raised from the metropolitan area of Washington, D.C. and Montgomery County, MD, this skillful sports talking MC will take you on a sports field expedition that will leave you with no other decision than to make listening to Wendell's World in Sports, the podcast, your main mission. Treasure the pleasure together as I discuss the important sports topics that are a must and crush and destroy it like the New England Patriots or Pittsburgh Steelers pass rush. TJ, watch out for the next episode and make sure you download, subscribe with great pride so people will highly rate along with giving great reviews to create clues for people to follow so this podcast can remain the king like LeBron through yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Wendell's World in Sports. I'm your host, Wendell Wallace. So glad that you could be with us. My YouTube channel, my YouTube episode of what I put down on a weekly basis, my audio YouTube or my audio shows And concerning my podcast, come out every Tuesday night, Wednesday morning, speaking about what's happening in the world of sports. Normally, I go for about 2 hours. Normally, I expand a lot more on my audio page, on my YouTube, on my podcast, in terms of what I'm speaking about in the world of sports. So there's some stuff about NFL coaches that I'm going to be speaking about on my podcast that I'm going to be expounding on in terms of another cycle of coaches. And how many of them are African Americans? Another opportunity for Eric Bieniemy to get a job, and he doesn't get it. How in the world can Brian Flores, what he did with the Miami Dolphins, how in the world does it take him this long to get a job? If he is going to get a job, rumor has it that he's interviewing for the Houston Texans job. Oh, man, please don't take that job. One thing I just hate to see these black men do is take these jobs. Yes, I understand that there's 32 teams, but, man, if you take a position, or if you take the head coaching position for a franchise like Jacksonville or Detroit or Houston or something like that, ones that are dysfunctional, ones that are inept, man, if you're a black man and the New York Jets or another one, just ask Todd Bowles, just ask Herm Edwards. Man, if you're speaking about something like that, man, that could stain you. That could damage your goods in terms of being successful if you do go ahead and try for another position. Jim Caldwell has not gotten a job yet, and you ask me, who before and after has done a better job as coach of the Detroit Lions than when Jim Caldwell was coaching that team? He can't get a sniff anywhere in terms of getting a real opportunity to get a job. So if you're a Brian Flores and you get hired by the Houston Texans, and because of that dysfunction, because of the fact that they don't have a quarterback, because of everything that's swirling and the many obstacles that Brian Flores is going to have to go through just to be somewhere near competitive, if this doesn't work out, first of all, he's not going to get years and years of opportunities to fix the problem like so many white coaches have at a franchise. And also the fact that if he doesn't get an opportunity to turn it around, then his chances are of getting another head coaching position seriously take a damaging, sometimes fatal blow. So those are some of the things I'll be speaking about when I'm doing my podcast. But right now, here on Wendell's World of Sports, a YouTube episode, remember to go ahead and like and subscribe to my video and to my YouTube channel. I'm speaking about the NFC and AFC playoffs. I spoke about the AFC playoffs. I spoke about what Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals did in terms of not being handed the. This wasn't a situation. This wasn't Brock Lesnar and knocking out the referee in the Royal Rumble and Paul Heyman handing the belt over to Roman Reigns after he speared Lesnar and then knocked him out, and then Lashley came over and got the 1, 2, 3 for the pin, and that's the reason why he's the Raw champion. No, this wasn't a situation like that where Kansas City did something to hand the belt over. This wasn't a situation where someone in the Kansas City organization, a player or such, giving the AFC championship to the Cincinnati Bengals. This was the Bengals earning it. And what does that game mean between Cincinnati and Kansas City in terms of the impact that it has as far as the long-term effect and impact in NFL history does it have on the game the week before, which was Buffalo and Kansas City? So there we go. So that's what I spoke about. First segment now, let's go ahead and talk about the Los Angeles Rams. Armando Vasquez's Los Angeles Rams. They're staying home, and they're going to the Super Bowl, baby. On the 1-year anniversary, as we heard this over and over again, the 1-year anniversary of his trade to the Los Angeles Rams is getting out of NFL purgatory, which is the Detroit Lions. Quarterback Matthew Stafford led 3 straight fourth-quarter scoring drives to erase a 10-point deficit against the San Francisco 49ers to win that football game. All-Pro receiver Cooper Kupp caught a pair of touchdown passes, one coming during the late rally. Aaron Darnold helped the Rams shut the door after Matt Gay kicked a 30-yard field goal to break a 17-17 tie with under 2 minutes left. And the Rams, after trailing 17-7 in entering the fourth quarter, came back to win that bad boy 20-17 despite the meltdown. If I'm a Los Angeles Rams fan, look, first of all, positives. Glass half full. Man, you made it to the Super Bowl. Congratulations. Way to go. All of those things. Way to go. But, man, you have to be a little bit concerned, a little bit nervous about Sean McVay, man. I mean, Sean McVay, he wanted that bad boy. Ooh, he wanted to get to that Super Bowl. He was feeling the pressure in terms of, I can't lose to this team again at home in the NFC Championship game. After all the moves that were made, I cannot lose to this team. And you saw some of the desperation moves, I guess you could say, in terms of challenging some calls and going for it on fourth down and such. I'm a little bit nervous if I'm a Los Angeles Rams fan. I'm a little bit nervous in terms of what's going to be happening if the Super Bowl at home with the expectations. If the Super Bowl is tight, what is Sean McVay going to do? What is Sean McVay going to call? What is Sean McVay going to challenge in terms of that type of deal? So, look, man, it was a game for Los Angeles where it was almost like, phew, man. We're speaking about did the 49ers, or I was speaking about it before, did the Kansas City Chiefs give the AFC Championship game away, or did the Cincinnati Bengals take it from them? And you could say the same thing about this game between San Francisco and Los Angeles. But this is a situation where the San Francisco 49ers took defeat from the jaws of victory and gave that victory to the Los Angeles Rams, or did the Rams show grit and determination and heart and all those type of things and toughness, mental, physical toughness to take that game away from the San Francisco 49ers? Because you can't tell me if Jaquiski Tarrant didn't drop that interception, then we might be taking a look at a whole new different scenario in terms of the San Francisco 49ers and the Los Angeles Rams. Again, not one play is going to determine the whole, rigmarole of winning and losing. But, boy, that drop interception was big. It was huge. It was important. So, before Sunday, the Rams had been 0-14 under Sean McVay when trailing by 10 or more points entering the fourth quarter, including the playoffs. This season it was 0-4, but you got to remember, during those times, maybe not this season in terms of 0-4, but the previous 10 times he had Jared Goff as his quarterback. Now you have Matthew Stafford as your quarterback. Big, big, big difference of all the moves that were made. When you're speaking about the acquisition of Matthew Stafford, when you're speaking about the in-season acquisition of Von Miller and Odell Beckham Jr., the biggest one of all was the trade for Matthew Stafford. And yes, the Los Angeles Rams gave up a fortune in terms of draft picks and everything to get Matthew Stafford. But you know what? Hey, man, if Matthew Stafford wasn't on this team on Sunday, they're not going to the NFC Championship game. Jared Goff is not having that type of impact that Matthew Stafford had. Going 31 of 45 for 337 yards, 2 touchdowns. Yes, should have been 2 interceptions, but still, he got it done. And we were speaking about, the narrative on Matthew Stafford. Is he going to be good enough? Because he was in Detroit and because, of all the facts that he didn't win in the playoffs and all these type of things. He was 0-3 in the playoffs over his first 12 seasons with the Detroit Lions, man. Is this guy going to be good enough to finally get us to where we need to go because of the expectations, man? Because of the expectations. It was almost, as far as the Rams celebrating that NFC Championship victory, it was almost a situation of how much of it was joy and happiness. And I'm not talking about Frankie Beverly and Mace. How much was it joy and happiness and all that type of thing? And how much of it was just plain old relief? Like, phew. Thank goodness, because we knew what was going to be staring at us if we would have lost that football game. But Matthew Stafford was the guy. Matthew Stafford, the trade that should have been made for them to get to the Super Bowl, and Matthew Stafford didn't do this, and Matthew Stafford didn't come up there, and then they're going to point to some of his bad games during the regular season and point and say, see, that's the reason why this was a bad trade, and now they mortgaged their future to get Matthew Stafford, and all this negativity that would have been swirling around the Rams and Stafford and Sean McVay and such if the Los Angeles Rams would have lost this football game. But now it's like, whew, we won this football game. And yes, Matthew Stafford or Detroit, who was more responsible? Both were, but more of the emphasis of why Matthew Stafford didn't do more in the playoffs was based on the square shoulders of the Ford family and the Detroit Lions organization. Because, as I mentioned before, in 12 seasons, never won a playoff game. He was 0-3. And in his years with Detroit, he has now led winning drives and consecutive playoff victories over Tampa Bay on the road, beating the defending champions and possibly knocking Tom Brady into retirement. And then this game against the San Francisco 49ers, a strong defensive unit. Secondary might be a little shaky, but still, we're speaking about the front four of the San Francisco 49ers, the fact that he led 3 fourth-quarter drives that ended up in points, which were the difference of the game. Hey, man, Matthew Stafford getting it done. Odell Beckham Jr. caught 9 passes on 11 targets for 113 yards. His first game with the Rams in which he had 100 yards receiving. Von Miller, the other in-season acquisition. Him and Donald combined for 7 quarterback pressures Sunday, all in the second half. And on those pressures, Jimmy Garoppolo went 1-7 on those passing plays. So this was a situation, man, where, again, the Rams aren't out of the woods yet. And I don't know, moving on in terms of the narrative is concerned and the psyche is concerned. And, hey, the Cincinnati Bengals, man, they're not supposed to, we always hear this nonsense when we speak about, oh, man, who's going to have the pressure? The Cincinnati Bengals might have the advantage because they're not supposed to be here. You ever hear that narrative? We've heard that narrative in sports many times. They're playing with house money because they shouldn't be here. So they have nothing to lose. I've always hated that. What do you mean a team doesn't have anything to lose? Yeah, they have something to lose. They have the opportunity to lose a championship. The Cincinnati Bengals, they're here. No one expected them to be there. So, they have the advantage over the Rams because they don't have anything to lose. Yeah, they have something to lose. They have the opportunity to lose a Super Bowl. And ask Dan Marino. It doesn't matter in terms of, hey, you know what? This is a situation where, yeah, we'll lose, but don't worry. We'll have like 4 or 5 other opportunities because we have Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow and T. Higgins and all these other guys. No, man. There is no guarantee, no matter how great you are, that you'll get back to the Super Bowl. Hell, who's been the best team for the last 4 years? The Kansas City football team. How many Super Bowls have they won? 1. How many Super Bowls have they played in? 2. It's not like that, man. Patrick Mahomes in AFC championship games is undefeated in terms of games ending in the fourth quarter. He's 2-0-2. Just the 2 losses have been in overtime. In Kansas City, Patrick Mahomes only had won 1 championship. While by now we would be speaking about Mahomes going for what, his 3rd? His 2nd at the very least? It doesn't mean anything. So when these jackasses sit here and talk about the team has nothing to lose because they have, they have nothing to, they have everything to gain and nothing to lose. Yeah, they're missing out on an opportunity to win a Super Bowl. Shit, this ain't Tom Brady in New England. Were you expect them to be back every single year, back in their heyday? This is the doggone Cincinnati Bengals, man. You don't know when Mike Brown is going to turn back into Mike Brown and the Cincinnati Bengals go back to being the Cincinnati Bengals again. So I always hate that narrative. Hey, they have everything. They have nothing to lose. I hate that narrative. Wendell's World in Sports. I'm your host, Wendell Wallace. So glad that you could be with us. Meanwhile, on the other end of the spectrum of this team has nothing to lose, the Los Angeles Rams really now have something to lose in terms of, look, maybe it would have been a situation if the Kansas City football team would have just gone ahead and done the fait accompli in terms of putting the finishing touches, the finishing moves on the Cincinnati Bengals, taking them out. Let's just say that Cincinnati loses to Kansas City. Kansas City wins the AFC Championship game 35-17. Relatively easy, this, that, and the other. They go into the Super Bowl to play the Los Angeles Rams. Okay, it's a situation where, look, if you lose to Kansas City, the way that they're playing, yes, it will be a disappointment. Yes, we'll be angry. Yes, it will be unacceptable. But, we are going to be playing against one of the burgeoning great teams in the last 5-10 years, and we're going up against, one of the greatest quarterbacks in the making right now, still in this prime. So, yes, fan base, everything else, losing to the Kansas City football team, if they were playing at the level that they were playing at, that many people thought they would continue to play at, entering the second half against the Cincinnati Bengals. If the Rams lose to that team, upset, disappointed, all of those type of things. But you can maybe understand that because of who Kansas City is. The Los Angeles Rams better beat the Cincinnati Bengals, point blank. The Los Angeles Rams better not lose to the doggone Cincinnati Bengals at home in the Super Bowl, facing a second-year quarterback with a makeshift with an offensive line that can't stop a pass rush. Oh, and by the way, that pass rush for the Los Angeles Rams has a guy on the defensive front four. His name is Aaron Darnold. I heard he's pretty good. Von Miller. I heard he's still a pretty good edge rusher. No excuses. No excuses. Yeah, you guys have Jamar Chase. We've got Jalen Ramsey. No excuses. Now, I'm not expecting Jalen Ramsey to shut him down, but he sure better not get 200 yards. We better not have a breakout game. Unacceptable, because doggone it, we paid a lot to get Jalen Ramsey from Jacksonville, so you better do what you need to do. We spent a lot of draft capital. We mortgaged our future for the Los Angeles Rams. As I mentioned it before on my podcast, the expectations for the Los Angeles Rams is to win Super Bowls, plural, not just one. But with this team, I think it has a 3-year window. If you take a look at some of the core players and the upcoming free agency and such, and sooner or later you're going to have to do something with this roster and all those type of things. People have to get paid and all those type of things. So, hey, man, as long as you have Cooper Kupp still in his prime, as long as you've got Matthew Stafford still doing what he's doing, you have Aaron Darnold in your prime, you have Von Miller, the move that you made, the in-season move that you made to get Odell Beckham Jr., Jalen Ramsey, no excuses. Again, and you're playing at home, no excuses. When the Cincinnati Bengals get into town for that week before the Super Bowl, I mean, they're going to have to be dealing with so much. Oh, and they're not going to be surrounded in their environment. For the Los Angeles Rams, they're going to be going to practice from their homes. They're going to be sleeping in their beds at night. They're going to be with their wife. They're going to be with their children. They're going to be with their comfort zone. They're going to be with their routine. They're going to be in a familiar environment. They're going to be in a comfortable environment. Maybe not as comfortable as, say, a regular season game, because we are talking about the Super Bowl, so there needs to be tickets and everything needs to be ramped up a little bit. But they're going to have that advantage of being basically at home while they're doing all these things, while the Cincinnati Bengals are going to have that obstacle of not being able to do that. This week, Cincinnati, get all of your stuff together in terms of tickets and who's coming to the games and where you're going to be seating and family and friends and hotels and all those type of things. The Rams, they don't have to deal with that stuff for the most part, or they'll be dealing with that in a much more relaxed, friendly environment in terms of getting that stuff together. So the Los Angeles Rams, no excuses. The Los Angeles Rams, no excuses in terms of what they need to do to win this football game. None at all. And as I mentioned before, you hate to put it in a situation where it's like they need to be relieved, but just think about the outcome. Just think about the aftermath. If the San Francisco 49ers with Jimmy Garoppolo as their quarterback would have beaten the Los Angeles Rams for the 5th, 6th, 7th time in a row or some nonsense like that. So, yes, good deal by the Los Angeles Rams. And again, no excuses, especially who you're playing, the upstart Cincinnati Bengals of years and years of dysfunction, frustration, losing. You guys better get it done. Sean McVay, you taught Zach Taylor everything he knows. You better go ahead and get the job done. So I'm going to be interested to see what's going to be happening in this Super Bowl coming up. But then again, plenty of time to talk about the matchups and the keys and the storylines and all that good stuff. I'm quite sure they'll be telling the Matthew Stafford story, and I'm quite sure they'll be doing all of those type of things. So not on this podcast. You can watch it, listen to it somewhere else, but I'm going to be sticking mainly with the game, the meaning of the game, and all those type of things. All right, I am done. I am out of here. Wendell Wallace, Wendell's World and Sports. Remember, as always, to go ahead wherever you listen to your favorite podcast, to download, to subscribe, to rate, to review. Give me them 5 stars. Say, this Wendell Wallace guy, I mean, not only is he on top of, not only is this guy, speaking the truth in terms of what's happening in the NFL and what was happening in the AFC and the NFC championship games, with him, being on video, Man, are you sure that this is Wendell Wallace speaking, or is this Denzel Washington back in 1989 out there doing this thing? Is this Will Smith about 15 years ago doing this, or is this really Wendell Wallace? You could take a look at me and say that, no, this ain't Sidney Poitier, this ain't Denzel Washington, this ain't Will Smith, this ain't Jamie Foxx, this is Wendell Wallace. Sexy as can be with my John Coltrane t-shirt on. Peace and love to all of you who are listening to the podcast. Wendell's World in Sports YouTube channel. Check it out. Subscribe. Do what you need to do. Like the video. Until next time, please do what you need to do to make your world, to make your block, to make your neighborhood, to make your household, make everything around you a much better place, a much better environment through love, peace, unity, understanding, having a conversation with those who are different from you, giving them the respect that they deserve, shutting up, listening, learning, and then taking those lessons, bringing it down to the younger generation so they can live in a utopian society, which we unfortunately don't have the privilege of living in. Wendell's World in Sports. Y'all be good. Now, as I'm out, get me with some music.